Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 AWS Community Day. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have all had to make changes to our daily lives, and that includes with this conference. At this time, I would like to recognize and thank the team at LoudSwarm and the many volunteers for helping to make this year's virtual event possible. What can you expect during today's event? We have several exciting presentations lined up for you, along with raffle prizes for those who participate by asking questions. We've created several Slack channels to help keep you informed and help with any questions that you may have during the event. Slack channel ACD20 support is available to assist with any technical issues or questions that you may have. If you are unsure as to where to go for help, please post your questions here and someone will be there to assist. Slack channel ACD20 hallway is available to mingle and network with other attendees. Again, we would like to thank you all for attending today's conference, and I hope you enjoy what we have planned for you. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. He was the Cloud Steward for AI in the Futures Group at Intuit. Currently, he's a Cloud Security Advisor at American Express and co-author of the book Pragamatical AI. He speaks at conferences and inspires people to migrate their IT workloads to the cloud. Please welcome our very own AWS Community Hero, Mr. John Varghese. John?
Thank you very much, Diane. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 4th Annual AWS Community Day. For those of you who don't know, the AWS Meetup group leaders in the Bay Area started the first AWS Community Day back in June of 2017. We have come a long way since then. We have had almost 100 Community Day events around the world. I'm glad to welcome you to the latest edition of what I now like to call the ACD. Usually we have it in person at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. We start with breakfast and a keynote from an industry leader, followed by unbiased talks from the user community. This year, of course, just like everything else, the ACD is also different, but not by much. Due to COVID, we have to host the event online, but the quality of the talks and the opportunities to network with your peers are still just the same as you have come to expect year after year. Matt White, a professor in computer science at the University of Utah, created the Illustrated Guide to a PhD. He did this to explain what a PhD is to new and aspiring graduate students. He said, imagine a circle that contains all human knowledge, everything from how trees get their rings to how Saturn got its rings. By the time you finish elementary school, you know a little bit of many things. You probably understand the basics of math, science, social studies, music, art, and reading. Consider that blue disk at the center of that circle to be that knowledge. By the time you finish high school, you know a bit more about all these subjects. That's the green circle. With a bachelor's degree, you gain even more well-rounded knowledge, represented here in pink. And you most likely pick up a specialty as well. Then with a master's degree, you deepen your knowledge in that specialty. For a few more years, you do research. You read research papers which take you to the edge of human knowledge. Once you're at the boundary, you focus. You push at the boundary for a few years until one day the boundary gives way. And that tiny little dent you've made is called a PhD. Of course, the world looks very different to you now. You know everything about that world. But when you look at the bigger picture, the fact is you know almost everything about almost nothing. But you don't really need a PhD to keep pushing the envelope. You don't even need to try to create new knowledge. You're doing it all the time just by doing your work. I say this because new knowledge for you is just as good as new knowledge for the world. When you do your PhD, you're creating new knowledge for the world. Even when you're not doing your PhD, you're creating new knowledge. You do it when you create a new document, or a new script, or a new application, or a new deployment, or a new security configuration. PhDs stand on the shoulders of giants. Back in 1675, Isaac Newton wrote in a letter to his fellow scientist, Robert Hooke, "If I saw farther, It is by standing on the shoulders of giants. I tell you, when you reference Stack Overflow and create a new routine, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. When you reference an ISO standard and model your processors around that, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. When you look up the cloud control matrix and answer the CIAQ questions, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. When you reference AWS well-architected framework and model your cloud infrastructure to align with its principles and recommendations, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. And that is the right thing to do. The computer age began when ENIAC was completed in 1945. It was the first multi-purpose computer. It set speed records with an amazing 5,000 editions per second. Computers have come a long way since then. A laptop can do billions of editions per second today. In the late 50s, computer systems were usually room-sized mainframes costing millions of dollars to purchase and operate. By the 1950s, the industry had bifurcated into number crunchers and business users. Scientific computers, customers would typically use Fortran programming language, and the business users would use COBOL. Just like we rent VMs in the cloud today, these enormous devices could be rented to save money. Back then, if you had access to an electronic computer, you were at the very forefront of science. The new space program made ample use of this technology. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union opened the space age with the launch of Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite. By the late 50s, more and more people were using electronic digital computers. NASA was an early adopter of electronic computers because they performed a lot of routine calculations to conduct simulations. By the time the Apollo program's first flight in 1966, nearly all aspects of the mission were either controlled or supervised with computers. These included mission planning, rocket countdown and launch, guidance, navigation, control of the spacecraft itself, telemetry and tracking, touchdown on the moon, and return to the Earth. You may all remember that in July 1969, man first set foot on the moon. It still gives me goosebumps to just imagine that. When I visit Hawaii just 6 hours away by plane, when I set foot outside the airplane, the warm air greets me and it feels so wonderful. I'm so far away from the mainland, on a remote island, but still here on Earth. It feels like a whole new world out there. But the moon is literally, by definition, a whole new world. Neil Armstrong placed one small step for a man. But something else more important happened in 1969. On October 29th, 1969, the first successful message was sent over ARPANET. UCLA student Charlie Klein transmitted from an SDS Sigma 7 computer at UCLA to an SDS 940 machine at the Stanford Research Institute. The first message was just the two letters LO. It was supposed to say login, but the computer sending the message crashed before the letter G was typed. In just 2 more years, we went from the first intercomputer communication to full-blown email. Ray Tomlinson is generally credited as having sent the first email across a network. He was the first to use the @ sign to separate the names of the user and the user's machine in 1971. He sent a message from one DEC-10 computer to another DEC-10. When I was in high school, my mom used to work at the IBM data center in San Jose. On the Take Your Kids to Work day, she told me about this thing called email. She said, I can send a message to a colleague in Germany. Then she sent a simple hello message to him. 2 minutes later, we got his reply. I was wonderstruck. Today, email is like air. Millions of transactions happen every second that generate emails. When you breathe in a lungful of air, you breathe in fewer molecules of air than the number of emails generated and sent during that same breath. and email is just one of the many innovations that have changed the world. Fast forward 2 decades to 2006. SQS, the first and only AWS service, has been in the market for 2 years. In 2006, the rest of AWS was introduced. Hundreds of thousands of developers signed up. But that was just the beginning. Now there are dozens of services and products on AWS, and the list keeps growing. AWS has kept innovating. I remember back in 2006, we had to rack and stack servers. I had no idea what the cloud would be. Even today, there are large firms that have not yet embraced the public cloud. But the fact is that it is becoming easier and easier. What I would like to ask you today is to look at AWS as an example and keep innovating. Keep pushing the boundary in 2020 and beyond. AWS has made it much easier for new startups to manifest innovative ideas into reality without having to spend much on capital. It is now easier for established firms to conduct innovative experiments at a moment's notice in the cloud on machines that are built to their specs using CloudFormation and Terraform, thanks to AWS. The cloud has made it easy for everyone to do what they want faster and more securely. What you need in order to innovate is a strong foundation. You already have it. All these years of working and learning in whatever field you choose to do your PhD or to hone your craft in has basically enabled you to build a foundation. Now, to build on top of that foundation, I recommend you try and learn something new every time you have a chance. If you think about it intelligently before you pick the new shiny thing to learn, it might work out better. But you don't really have to. It may not at once lead to any significant achievements or profit, but over time it will. In the worst case, you will at least learn where you should not be headed. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are hot opportunities today. So are IoT and serverless. You could try out a new domain, maybe for several years, and then go back to where you started. When you come back to a field after a break of a few years, you will see that the guiding principles remain the same, and the mechanics are fundamentally different. They're always more interesting. It stimulates your mind. When you're out of a field for a while, there are others who are continuing to work in that discipline and will push the boundaries of knowledge in that line of work. When you come back, you can learn all the new stuff. We have a great show for you today. We have 24 talks lined up. I hope they will inspire you to consider new topics to learn from. This is an opportunity to learn new things. These talks cover a range of ideas and services. We have a talk about securing S3 buckets by properly configuring them. You may all have heard several times on the news that S3 buckets were exposed or hacked. These attacks can be avoided by properly configuring them. Josh Stella will dig into the complex layers of S3 security and how other AWS services such as IAM and EC2 can create S3 vulnerabilities that you may not be seeing, and how malicious actors exploit them. If it is IoT you're interested in, Misha Spiegelmach will show you how to set up an ARM device to run with AWS Lambda, IoT Core, and Greengrass. He will cover building an OS image, Greengrass topics, messages, and monitoring. We have at least 2 talks that cover the new transit gateway that was introduced at re:Invent last year. Our own Dr. Stefan Gibert will touch upon that in his talk on serverless networking. Nitin Ashok and Rodrigo Balan will cover the benefits of the transit gateway and some of the best practices. Rick Sherman will talk about how introducing monitoring and observability earlier provides greater visibility for both developers and operations. If you are new to AWS, it is easy to feel lost at sea among the options. There is so much documentation out there. How do you sift through the hype of real knowledge when it comes to cloud technologies? What are the anti-patterns in cloud technology, and how do you avoid them? Josh Reed looks at how we could do a better job onboarding people to the cloud. We have 3 tracks so you can pick what you want to watch. If there are 2 talks you want to watch happening at the same time, don't worry. You can always go back to a completed talk and watch it from the beginning on demand. And if you don't have time today, it will soon be available on YouTube. During the talk, if something is not clear or if you have a question for the speaker, feel free to ask your question on Slido. The moderator will ask the question for you at the end of the talk, or if the speaker so prefers, during the talk. There will be a Slido board for each track. You can find it on the right side once you log into CloudSwarm. One of the most attractive features of the AWS Community Day is the ability for people from different companies and varying experiences in AWS to come together and chat with each other, to network, mostly during the breaks. While we have plenty of breaks in our online version of the conference as well, there are even more opportunities to network since everyone is always on Slack. But that's not all. Unlike the in-person conference, you can take the conversations home and continue them later. Slack offers a very important asynchronous communication mechanism for this conference. We have automatically added you to a few channels. They all start with ACD20. Each channel has its own purpose. If you have any questions or concerns and need support, please ask in the support channel highlighted in purple. For networking with others, the best channel would be the hallway channel. Think of this as the water cooler or the grand hall in the Computer History Museum. Each of the 3 tracks has its own channel where people can discuss the presentations in that specific track. This conference is made possible by the generosity of our sponsors. We have 3 channels where you can interact with our sponsors and engage with them. In large groups like we have on Slack, a good practice is to keep conversations in threads. Just hover over the message you want to respond to and click on the thread icon, which looks like this, to start a thread. Most importantly, one of the best features of this platform is the ability to speak face-to-face with the speaker. Note that there will be plenty of time between talks. After every talk, there is at least 15 minutes, and in many cases 30 minutes to talk face-to-face with the speaker. This is like the informal Q&A you usually have in a live conference after the presentation is over, where the audience members hang out and chill with the speaker. Just click on the Join Face-to-Face button in the presentation page. Like I said earlier, thanks to the sponsors for making this event possible. I would like to thank Few for being our top sponsor. They have a giveaway in the digital swag page, a free for-hour trial account for developers. I'd like to thank Heimdall Data, whose database proxy is available in the AWS Marketplace to accelerate Amazon RDS scale without application changes. Notable features are query caching, read-write split, and connection pooling. I would like to thank Hypertrace by Traceable. It is an open source distributed tracing and observability platform. They will help you add distributed tracing to a microservice with Hypertrace on AWS. CloudSwarm is the platform on which we are conducting this conference. They have gladly agreed to sponsor this event for the benefit of the AWS community. They would love to receive your feedback on this platform at the CloudSwarm feedback Slack channel. And last but not least, Intuit is a great company to work for. They have one of the largest installations of AWS and have always supported the AWS Community Day in the Bay Area. Special thanks to Jonathan Korn and Yogesh Pai for their full support from day one. Without them, the world would be a different place. They have been shining examples of people leading the change around them. The AWS Community Day is an event organized by volunteers. Without their help, managing an event of this scale, free for attendees, would be, in a word, impossible. Every year, our volunteers arrive as early as 7 a.m. to start arranging the registration desk and other facilities to make the event smooth for the attendees. This year, due to COVID, we had to improvise. Volunteers had to spend even more time than usual and started engaging weeks in advance. My heartfelt thanks to all the volunteers who made this possible. You can navigate to the volunteers page on the conference website and find their contact information. Feel free to express your gratitude to them over Slack. And now I want you to go forth and start leading. Thank you very much for attending the conference today, and I hope you have a great time.